it is really kind of humorous how this is all worked out as far as these sermons that it happened to be the night that we're having ice cream and we're talking about fasting in this lesson. But that's just a coincidence. I can't, and this happens to be the one that was in the list of things to do as we go through the Sermon on the Mount. As you well know, we're going through it basically verse by verse or um, or topic by topic, and so we're going to do this. Now I know that there are occasions in which we have to set aside certain lessons in order to do the and to address certain things. I'm always reminded of the book of Jude verse 3. Um, Beloved, these things write I unto thee, hoping to come to thee shortly. But if I tarry, beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto thee of the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that you should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. That's the verse I quoted 1 Timothy chapter 3, and I think it's verse number 15. But anyway, so sometimes and look at it. Now we know that Jesus began this particular section with the thesis, and that's found in verse 1 of chapter 6. Take heed that you do not your alms before men to be seen of them, otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. In order to illustrate the thesis, he gave three illustrations. The first of those illustrations was almsgiving, verses 2 through 4, which we have considered and looked at, 5 to 15. And in this lesson, we're going to look at verses 16 through 18, which concerns fasting. Now, these three illustrations cover three areas of man's religious life. Almsgiving concerns the disciples' care for one another. Prayer concerns the disciples' communion with God, and fasting concerns putting to death the deeds of the flesh. Now, these three illustrations really covers the whole of righteousness. In this lesson, we're going to look at the illustration concerning fasting. Fasting is one of those things that's almost vanished from our. Now, more than likely, many of us have thought about it at different times. And what place does fasting have in your life? And really associated with both of those questions is how many lessons have you heard on fasting? Well, I don't know about you, but I haven't heard very many. And the only ones that I've heard about are those that I've taught. Have you ever fasted? And if you have you fasted for spiritual reasons? I think that's the real key here. Not everybody is fasted, and not everybody is fasted for spiritual reasons. Now, with these questions in mind, consider Jesus' instruction fast. Be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Jesus' instructions on almsgiving, prayer, and fasting were equal in obligations, and one was not more prominent or more important than the other. The importance of each one and the importance of fasting. In our text, Jesus' instruction concerning fasting was given because of need. And so let's consider some lessons concerning fasting. We're going to start out with defining our terms, and I think it's always important that we define our terms. So we're going to ask the question, what is fasting? Now, in a capsule, fasting is abstinence for spiritual purposes. Now, generally, we think about fasting as the abstinence of food and or drink. However, fasting is really more broad than that. We need to recognize that fasting is really, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and verse 5, Paul instructed the church there concerning um, the relationship of a husband and wife. And he said, defraud ye not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that ye may give yourself unto fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. Included other matters besides that. But also notice that it is for a spiritual purpose, and I think we have to emphasize that. A person may fast for various reasons. One of the most common reasons for fasting is for the physical benefits. And I knew a lady up in Kansas City that she was a member of the church, and she fasted every week. And I don't remember what day it was, but one day a week she did not. But she didn't do it for spiritual reasons. She did it for mental clarity, and she did it for physical reasons. And quite frankly, she was in good shape physically because of other things besides that. However, this is not the type of fasting that we're talking about, and it's not the type of fasting that Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, there are different kinds, or maybe I should say different levels of fasting. Now, generally, at least food, and sometimes it may include drink. But you could have fast for a longer period of time, and that was an abstinence from choice or special foods. And we'll look at a passage or two concerning that here in just a second. Now, I look back over my life, and I remember that in some denominations, as I was growing up, they had different fasts. And some denominations, some religious groups have a fast during the so-called Easter holiday, and sometimes at Christmas and different things, different holidays of the year. And foods. But I remember different ones fasting from things they don't like. Well, that's no fast. I mean, I could fast from mac and cheese. I don't care for mac and cheese, never have cared for mac and cheese. And, I could fast from that. Well, I could fast from that my whole life and it wouldn't bother me. I mean, but that's not the kind of thing that we're talking about. Now, I know the grandkids, they think that I eat ice cream every day, all the time. That's not. We have ice cream because Grampy likes to share it with grandkids. That's the reality right there. And he'll keep it stocked up because he likes to share it with ice cream. Now, I have some ice cream once in a while by myself. But, every time I do, I think, this is not very good. I mean, it's not the same as sharing it with my grandkids. Now, it's not that the ice cream doesn't taste good. It's just not the same when you share it. Well, now, if we were going to fast and we decided to fast from ice cream nowadays, then that would be more of a fast that you would read about within Scripture. In Matthew, the 11th chapter, verse 18, Jesus said, "For John came neither eating nor drinking." The passage of that particular passage helps us to fully understand what Jesus taught. In Luke, the 7th chapter, in verse 33, there it says, "And John the Baptizer, John the Baptist, came neither eating bread nor drinking wine. And he said, he hath a devil." Now, what was John's diet? It was locusts and wild honey. Matthew chapter 3, verse 4, and Mark 1 and verse 6. Special diet, and it was a object lesson of repentance and abstinence. And so it is then fasts were of a certain thing. Now, I don't know that eating bread or drinking wine would be, as far as I'm concerned, a real fast, but it would be something that we would consider a fast. Now, as mentioned, there were fasts which included other bodily matters, and we need to recognize that. Now, in defining fasting, we must also consider the purpose of fasting. I think I got ahead of myself as far as this. Okay, so the purpose of fasting, then, number one, the purpose of strengthening. And Paul mentions this in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 1, in stripes, in prison, in tumults, in labors, in watching, in fasting. And so it was during those times of grief, during those times of trial, Paul then gave time for fasting. But then there was also fasting on occasions for a deeper consecration or a closer devotion to God. In 1 Corinthians 5 and chapter 7, verse 5, as we read just a little bit ago, that a couple then withheld from one another those sexual privileges in order to fast and to give themselves over to fasting and prayer. But he's for your incontinency. And then fasts were associated with serious meditation and took place when making serious decisions, as in Acts the 13th chapter, verses 2 through 3. And they ministered to the Lord and fasted. The Holy Spirit said, "Separate me, Barnabas and Saul, for the work whereunto I have called them." And when they had fasted and prayed, they laid their hands on them and they sent them away. Now, this concerned the church in Antioch of Syria when they sent Paul and Barnabas on that, or Barnabas and Saul on that first missionary journey. About these different things. I remember churches in the past that I was associated with in different ways, and I always think about the Preston Road School of Preaching, and those elders would encourage fasting before gospel meetings and special occasions like lectureships and things like that. And that kind of fasting would be determined by the individual, and we'll deal more with that, but it'd be a different level of fasting. So some of us might be able to fast completely, maybe beseech the throne and meditate about the gospel meeting that's getting ready to take place. Then others may be able to fast for a few days from their special diet, or maybe from a certain type of food, or maybe from meats, or maybe from desserts, or whatever it might be. And they could fast for those kind of things. But when you look at fasting in that way, and especially, I think about those of us that are older and we have these dietary difficulties, we'd have some other problems that would exist as a result of it. But could we go without a certain type of food? Well, yeah, we could do that. So we could fast. And I've known others that have thought about it in the same way. Well, there are important times within our lives that we could devote ourselves deeper to God. Now, what does God teach then about fasting, or what does Jesus teach about fasting? Well, it was taught and practiced in the Old Testament. There's no doubt about it. On the Day of Atonement, God commanded the children of Israel to fast. Now, that's found over in Leviticus chapter 16, verses 29. So fasted. Now, what great men of faith fasted? Well, you know that Moses fasted when he went up onto the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, what kind of fast was it? Well, we don't know. I don't know that it would have been a complete fast, but it must have been pretty nearly complete, because it says he neither ate bread or drank water in that particular verse. David was a man that fasted, and And he fasted until that child died. But then when he died, he then began to eat, and his servants questioned him concerning it. Also, Elijah fasted in 1 Kings chapter 19 and verse 8. And this is when Jezebel and Ahab was after him, and he fled and went up to the Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and he didn't eat meat for 40 days and 40 nights. And finally, God then fed him through an angel. We also know that Ezra fasted in Ezra chapter 10 and verse number 6. And and he did it because of the transgression that Judah had a part in. We also know that Daniel did not fast, but Daniel is kind of an interesting thing in that particular passage, Daniel 10 and verse 2. Daniel wrote, I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth, neither did I anoint myself at all, till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. It doesn't say that he didn't eat bread, he just said he didn't eat pleasant bread, which means that he didn't eat bread that tasted good. So at the end of the Mosaic age, it was common for some Pharisees to fast. Testament is full of examples too. We know that on occasion Jesus fasted before he was tempted of Satan. He went off to himself in the wilderness, and he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. And the text says that afterwards he was a hungered. And you could imagine how hungry he would have been. And Satan then tempted him with eating or turning stones into bread. Well, as we've already noted, the church in Antioch of Syria, fasted before they sent Paul and Barnabas on that first missionary journey. We also know that Cornelius fasted after he sent forth, and he was waiting for Peter to come to provide him the bread of heaven, that is the gospel message. We also know that Saul of Tarsus fasted in Acts 9 and verse 9. After he saw the light, he went up to the street called Straight in Damascus, and there he fasted until Ananias came to him. We also know that Paul and Barnabas fasted at the end of the missionary tour. Now they're Antioch of Syria, and they went on that special missionary tour, taking the gospel up to Asia Minor, and then Paul and Barnabas fasted at the end of that missionary tour. In fact, the text says, and when they had ordained them elders in every church and had prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord, on whom they believed. Well, so now what is Jesus teaching on fasting? Well, we read already Matthew 6, verses passage. There it says in Matthew 6, verses 16 to 18, Moreover, when ye fast, be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head, and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret. And thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But then also Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 and 15. There it says, Then came to him the disciples of John, saying, Why do we unto them? Can the children of the bride chamber mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken from them, and then they shall fast. Now Jesus is the bridegroom, and he predicted his disciples would fast after his ascension, after his going back to the heaven. Now keep in mind, this was not a command, but it was a prediction of what his disciples would do and what would take place. Now, in summary, what Jesus taught was that fasting was not a matter of public devotion, but it's a matter of private devotion. And then secondly, fasting is to be observed without revealing it to others. And so we keep it to ourselves. And lastly, then fasting was for the good of a person's own soul. So it was a personal thing. Now, with that in mind, then we need to ask in our third point, how are disciples to fast? And we have some basic other illustrations, and as Jesus did throughout this particular section, he pointed out the wrong way of almsgiving, the wrong way of prayer, and then he pointed out the wrong way of fasting. And then he also pointed out the right way of almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. And so we're going to do the same thing. So the wrong ways to fast. First, then, Jesus did not teach his disciples to fast in a mechanical way. Now, religious fasting should be done for spiritual purposes, and it's associated with intense prayer and meditation, different things like that. We can give ourselves to prayer and meditation about what's going to take place. It is not merely a process of discipline. Obviously, discipline is involved in fasting, but it's not mechanical. It's not just a matter of discipline. It is more than controlling the body, because the body ought to always be in subjection. There's never a time when the body should not be in subjection. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 27, "But I keep under my body and bring it into myself should be a castaway." And so it's not just simply a discipline of the body. We have to discipline the body all the time. So there's more to it than that mechanical nature of that. So then Jesus also did not teach his disciples fasting would be for direct or immediate results. Now, fasting will bring results. There's no doubt about that. In verse 18 of Matthew 6, Jesus said, "That thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly." So it does come with reward, but it's not, we can't expect an immediate reward. Fasting will open up a floodgate of blessings and joy. Well, I'm not sure that that's really true. Now, this thought is sometimes applied to each of the three illustrations. If you do your almsgiving, it will open up a floodgate of blessings and joy, they say. If you pray, it'll open up a floodgate of blessings and joy. And if you fast, it'll open up a floodgate of, quite confident that that's not the case. If it was the case, then who would be controlling the blessings? You, me, or God? You know, if we then do these things, it might bring some joy and blessings in this life, maybe, but we're not in control of those blessings. God is. Such blessings are not automatic. And then Jesus did not teach fasting for purely is not morally wrong. We don't want to make it sound like that. And I didn't think about that lady in that way that I knew years ago that fasted each week. Now, she admitted she didn't fast for spiritual reasons, but it was for physical reasons. Was it morally wrong for her to do that? Well, no, it wasn't. If we want to fast for these reasons, that's fine. Nothing wrong with it. But that is not what Jesus was teaching in this verse, or these verses. Some say after 3 or 4 days of fasting, there's a period of unusual mental clarity, which is attributed to as Christians to have found this same clarity of mind. I mean, I don't think we have to fast to find that clarity of mind. Now, it might help sometimes, but that's not the purpose of it. So what are then some right ways to fast? Well, first and foremost, as pointed out in previous lessons, it needs to be approached with the right motive. It should be driven for a need of consecration. and for His service. It is not motivated by diet. It's not motivated by an experience of some high mental plane. It is something done when a person feels impelled to do it in order to accomplish some spiritual reasons. And secondly, fasting should be done without calling attention to ourselves. And I think this is really the one point that is driven home by Jesus in this particular section. Now, there's really kind of an interesting play on words that are found in the Greek that you don't have it in the English, and I don't know that it could be translated to English. The word disfigure and the word appear are from the same root word in the original language. The word disfigure is the negative of appear and can be translated shine. So the hypocrite then makes, that's really the idea there. The hypocrite who wants to be seen, he makes his face not to shine in order to be seen. And thus Jesus taught His disciples not to bring attention to self in any way. We have to be really careful that we do not do that. Now, it can be done, I suppose, in different ways, and I guess this really brings to appear natural. Rather than putting on a sad face, we appear natural. Nobody knows that we're fasting. Rather than putting on a happy face, some people might do that to make everybody know that they are fasting. No, we're to be natural. In other words, when we fast, nobody else needs to know. It's something that we do between ourselves and God, and that's it. It is something between us and no one else. Though in our face should be done. Again, attention is not to be brought upon ourselves. Now, this lesson is not suggesting all Christians must fast. That's not what I intend for this lesson, and I don't think that's what Jesus taught either. But it is strongly suggesting it is good and proper and right for Christians to fast, because fasting can be a tremendous way to draw near to God. And we can do that by fasting so that we will have a clear view of what is truly important. It's like one person said, in fact, it was just the other day while we were at the lecture, and that is, she said, I live to eat, but then she said, my husband eats to live. Well, there are occasions in which, we need to have a fast. Such experiences make us stronger in endurance, makes it richer in faith, and makes us better equipped in service. This evening, we do want to offer the invitation. There may be someone that would like to respond to it. I realize the lesson is not really intended for that purpose, but we always want to give because we want all men to be saved. To do so. This evening, we offer the invitation to you. If you need to respond, won't you come as together we stand and sing to encourage you.